Want to have a conversation with y'all this morning, and I hopefully, will maybe say one or two things that might be inspiring, but also to get inspired. I need you all to help keep me inspired. Good morning, good morning. What's happening? What's the word? Hey, people, haven't you heard? It's too many people, and it's not too funny. Uncle Devin said we got to move that money. Look, we're going to have just a casual conversation. I never know whether these should be tucked in or I'm just going to leave them hanging out. They're so long. I never figure that out. But good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, the 28th. I have yet to really truly study the whole thing of leap year. I guess it happens every 4 years, and I can imagine those who were born on leap year, what they deal with every year, every 4 years or whatever. I don't know, but I'm just happy to be here. Y'all. I ain't gonna lie. I'm happy to see you all. Thank you for tuning in. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. What's happening, Benita, Duke? Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I want to share with you at least just what's on my mind about, was it 4 years ago now? No, 6 years ago that I walked away from making six figures to do what I'm doing now. And I know that every last one of us have passions and dreams and goals and things that they would like to do. And we all know that we all also have means to an end. Back in 2018, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about me walking away from my job, what I felt when I walked away from it, not to another job, but I walked away to me, to focus on those things that I felt was important. The fear of starting and focusing in on what you do and having a strategy. Having a strategy on really just focusing on you. In 2018, I released a children's album called "Be Yourself" in 2018, and it was really to inspire children about learning about being yourself. Little did I know that I was really preaching to myself. It's easy to tell and to give advice to other people, but sometimes it's harder to follow it on your own. And so in 2018, when my wife and I, part of it goes back to what I'm about to talk about anyway, and that's about being your authentic self. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But I mean, I'm right at the verge of 20,000 followers, and I'm really, really amazed. And it did not really start happening until I learned to be myself. But I'm 56 years old, and I've always known about being yourself, but you get confronted with that at different times and different stages in your life, no matter where you are. So when I was younger, I was being myself. I was focusing. I was doing the things I needed to do. But once I really started being myself online, and it's part of it is being vulnerable. Part of it is sharing what you truly feel, being having the willingness to unlearn and to teach people, or tell people, rather not teach, tell people how I've been willing to unlearn everything that I've ever learned before so that I can grow. To me, that's the key to any type of growth is, do we have the willingness to unlearn everything that we've been taught before? And so in 2018, I was working, I live here in the Washington, D.C. area, about how do we use our situation for our life's purpose. I never have, and I never did see working that full-time job as a deterrent from my goals. It actually helped me because it gave me the opportunity to plan. And so for 19 years, I was not only doing that, but I had just started working and doing my own work as a children's music artist. And so I literally was doing both at the same time. I would, at Metro, there were over 10,000 employees. And let me go back here. Okay, there was over 10,000 employees. And so there were only three of us investigators at the time that I was there. So, and about a third of that population worked the midnight shift. So I would regularly and often volunteer to work the midnight shift to go in to help resolve discrimination complaints. But what that did allow me to do was it gave me my time during the day to work on my projects. And so I was now, I would work at night and then I would go in to do a couple of schools in the morning. And luckily, doing some assemblies or workshops, it only lasts about an hour or 2 hours. So I still had time to come home, get some rest, and then go back to work. So I was able to take the job and make the job. It really was a means to an end. And it was a great means to an end. I enjoyed the ability to help people and to try to resolve complaints. So that to me was very important. I didn't want to leave and go take another job. I wanted to now work on me. And I didn't want to just continue to pour the best of me in terms of my younger self into that job and not give myself the opportunity, to really give myself the best of me. And it's a struggle. It's really a struggle. So my wife and I had made a decision that it was time for me to walk away. And in August of 2018, I turned in my resignation. But let me tell you, before I turned that resignation in, this huge thing called fear came over. And many of you all have experienced it. It was like, oh my goodness, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm making the wrong decision? What if things go wrong and I'm giving up this job of 19 years? And I was making six figures. I began listening to a number of different people that were talking, and they flipped it on me. They said, well, what if you don't do it and you miss out on success? You miss out on where you're supposed to go. And then I thought about it. And I'm saying this to you all, for especially those who are working. Don't feel bad about where you are, what you're doing. If you're stuck and you know it's time to make a move, then that's maybe when you need to start considering making a change. For me, there were more than enough signals that I received that it was time for me to go. This whole thing of fear is real. But I've come to realize that, and really embrace fear. Fear can be a true asset if you look at it in the right context. I think it was Michael Jordan that just said that it was the fear of losing that made him great. That he practiced that much harder and he worked that much stronger and became more dedicated to his art. That he became a better person because he allowed this whole thing of fear to help him. So for me, I realized and I began to recognize fear as really, it wasn't anything that was trying to stop me. It was just trying to encourage me. And the only thing in this world that stops the majority of us, when we look at what's going on in society, we look at what's going on around the world. One of the things that is causing so much inequality and so much oppression is fear. People's inability or fear of retaliation for things going wrong, or fear that something's going to happen to them if they speak up. And anybody that knows me, that I've always spoken up. Going back to college, going back to two different things. And I just say that, it was something that I remember reading in the works of W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm sorry, I got this. Look at this book, y'all. Should I get rid of it? I've had this book for over 30 years, and I'm always reading. This is the W.E.B. Du Bois speaks. His speeches from 1920 to 1963. Some good stuff in here, some real good stuff in here. But listening to, going back and looking at people like Dr. Du Bois, who lived until he was 95 years old. And he lived in an era of McCarthyism, where just saying that you were for peace, you were subjected to infiltration by the U.S. CIA or FBI. He had his passport taken from him. He had his salary cut drastically because he was willing to. He didn't have the fear to say what he believed and to speak his truth. And his truth just so happened to be a truth that was not part of the narrative of the United States. And I went back and I look at his life. I mean, he wrote 3 different autobiographies. This is the great W.E.B. Du Bois. He died one day before the March on Washington in 1963. W.E.B. Du Bois is one of the founders of the NAACP, of the Niagara movement. If you ever go to Harper's Ferry and look at the role that the Niagara movement played with John Brown and at Harper's Ferry, W.E.B. Du Bois was the father, one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, and the role that he played in the first 5 Pan-African Congresses. But do you know that when he died, and you call it a fear, but I think he was liberated in his own mind. When he died, they barely mentioned him at the March on Washington here in Washington, D.C. They didn't even mention him. And part of it was because he spoke out against U.S. violence, against militarism. He was for communism. He wasn't afraid of even saying that word. It ain't gonna hurt you. Communist, it ain't gonna hurt. It's just a word, okay? But it's also a way of life. He spoke out about many of these different things, and the very organizations that he helped to start turned their back on him. He ended up dying in Ghana, working with Kwame Nkrumah, and in their relationship with Kwame Nkrumah, and then of Ghana, the first president of Ghana, that came to power in 1957, and also get Kwame, not Kwame Ture, that's of course Stokely Carmichael. I'm having a brain. I mean, this is crazy. I know, out of Guinea. It'll come back to me. Sekou Touré. I'm sorry, the great Sekou Touré out of Guinea. And so he died there. You can go, and his body is buried in Ghana. Now, it's Mother Africa. And it is interesting when you look at his life, because his life transitioned. It evolved, rather. But nonetheless, he still had the courage to stand up and face his fears. And he came under attack. But there's nothing that you can do in this world that someone is not going to like what you do. And I just want to encourage everyone to be yourself. Like my 2018 album that I thought I was teaching to children was really speaking to myself. Let me go back and just share with everyone. So those of you all that are following me on Uncle Devin Show, I am Uncle Devin. They call me Uncle Devin, or at least that's my name. My name is Devin Walker, aka Uncle Devin, the children's drumcussionist. I live here in Washington, D.C., and I am a children's music entertainer. The Uncle Devin Show is an interactive musical experience for children that uses drums and percussion to cultivate their minds. Sort of a dynamic cross between DC's Trouble Funk and Schoolhouse Rock. So I left a good government job to become a full-time children's music entertainer, educator, arts integration professional. And it's been absolutely one of the best decisions I could have ever made. You can find more. That's what the Uncle Devin Show is about. You might see me talking about a number of different things. And as James mentioned, Go-Go Black historian. I grew up in D.C. With the indigenous music of go-go. That's been my life. And I'll get to that in one second, James. That's a good question. And so using the indigenous music of DC, I found that it's a great tool to be able to not only educate children and to pass this genre of music on to others, but I use it to educate teachers and parents on how to use this genre in your curriculums, in your life lessons, and moving forward. And I use my own experiences, such as playing in go-go bands when I grew up. Now, I never played in any of the big go-go bands, Rare Essence, Experience Unlimited, Junkyard, anything like that. I've always played in small neighborhood bands that probably never did more than 3 or 4 shows at a local rec center for about 40 people. But those are some of the best times in my life. I grew up in Seat Pleasant, Maryland. Shout out to that Seat Pleasant crew. So for me, that was, one of the things that I did. So I left that full-time job to do this. And I'm not sitting here telling anybody to rush off and quit your job. That is not what I'm saying. I believe that everything has to be planned, that you have to go into it with thought, and some can do both at the same time. It's okay. For me, where I was at, it was just important for me to leave at that particular time. Although I was there for 19 years, if I didn't have a pension at that time, because when I started that job, they had just gotten rid of the pension plan. See, this organized labor thing is incredible. So it was whatever I saved in my own 401ks and those types of things. So there was really no incentive for me to wait until I was 55 or so to leave. So I decided to go ahead and take this leap now. And to me, that was even fate telling me it was time for me to go. Because if I would have had another excuse to stay, I would have stayed and may not have been able to do some of the things that I'm doing now. And to touch so many children and families, it is absolutely incredible. And so overcoming that fear, the fear of, what if I starve? The fear is, I'm going to lose my house. The fear of all these things, it's going to always be there. And I just want to encourage each of you to overcome that fear. I heard someone once say that fear is sort of like someone bear hugging you from behind, and it's got his fingers around your torso, and it's hard for you to breathe because that fear can suffocate you. But I've learned that instead of looking at it in that sense, accept fear and ask, just go to it and ask fear, why are you here? What is it that you're trying to tell me? And if you listen hard enough, you realize that fear is saying, I'm not here to stop you from doing what you're supposed to do. I'm here to encourage you. I'm here to let you know that you can make it. That the more you accept who you are and you plan appropriately, the more you can live your life and be yourself. And so I've come to realize that fear is natural. There's nothing wrong with fear as long as we use it, and to help us to do our own thing. So, for me, moving into this space of being myself was important. But to be honest, I've always done this. When I came out of college, I had the honor of going to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Go Retrievers in Baltimore, and really in Catonsville, Maryland, but we call it Baltimore. I started doing research. I was a political science major. But when I came out, a professor, the great Dr. Ackland Lynch, lives here in D.C. also, was one of my mentors. And I was struggling as to whether or not I was going to continue in higher education, whether I was going to go get a PhD or master's or what have you. I didn't really have the money, and I couldn't really get into the schools that I wanted to. My grades weren't to the point. I kept getting denied from different places. I got a couple of acceptances. And Dr. Lynch said, well, Devin, you got a passion for research. I've seen it in your work. I took one graduate level class with him, where we focused on the lives of W.E.B. Du Bois, C.L.R. James, and Kwame Nkrumah. And he said, well, Devin, you can go and get your PhD. And he says, I'm not going to discourage you from that. But he says, but you don't need a PhD to do the work. Why don't you just go and do the work yourself? He knew I had a passion for organizing, and I was one of the organizers in the 90s, especially in the whole student movement era, Black Power movement era of the 90s. So I started doing my own research, and I created a newsletter. I created a company called Kemet Social Research and Design. Kemet Social Research and Design. I'm going to ask, does anybody know what Kemet means? I'm gonna wait before I share what that means and see if anybody knows what Kemet means. But I started this research company, and with it, I did a newsletter. The newsletter was called the Kemet Report. And I was probably 22, 23 years old when I started it. I was absolutely amazed at how much people loved the information that I put in there, because it was really geared toward educating the Black church to our true history, to the true African origins of Christianity and of religion and of the world and of everything that you have out here, music, art, all of that. It was more than just me stating the fact. Okay, yeah, this, the first, this was this. I had to be able to show and provide resources so that others could follow through. And so my newsletter ended up growing. I'll never forget. I started getting subscriptions from some inmates in prisons. One of which was still friends with today. He's out now, but I remember getting some subscriptions, especially from the Northeast Ohio Correctional Facility, which I've had the opportunity to go and speak there back in the 90s. But I also received a subscription, and this blew me away because I didn't know much about many things, but I had received a subscription from the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. I knew nothing about Wisconsin. As Dick Gregory once said, he said, I thought there were more wild elephants up there than there were Black folks. I didn't know, but there were some folks that were interested in my research. And my research really dug deep into the origins of the social gospel and liberation theology and the origins of monopoly capitalism, and not just talking about it from a theoretical standpoint. Anybody can just mention, oh, we need to get rid of this, we need to do this. But I literally went to the library long before there were any internet. I would almost practically live at the library looking at those old microfiche and old articles, and started doing research. And in particular, in 1991, that's when the United States got into the Iraq War over the whole misinformation of weapons of mass destruction. And I wanted to show a connection between the U.S. Defense, the defense contractors, the U.S. media. What was the third one? So it was the U.S. defense contractors. And the top oil companies, because oil was big in the Iraq issue back then. So I went to the library and I looked at the top three of each one of those industries: the defense contractors, oil companies, and the top media. And then I looked at every last one of their board of directors and their CEOs and all of that. And I compiled the list. This was a study, because I'm a political scientist. I do studies. This was trying to be as objective as possible. And I can send anyone a copy of this if you want it. I still have it. And I determined that after doing all of this, I did about 5 or 6 different media companies in 91, and determined that less than 5 people controlled all of the media in this country. And they were also controllers of the defense contractors and these oil companies. And many of their board of directors were members of Congress, were members of these elite organizations like the Business Roundtable and the Business Council and the Council of Foreign Relations. And I wanted people to see who these everyday people were that were making these decisions, and recognizing that it was no accident that the media was in favor of the war, because the media was benefiting from it, because the same people who were getting these defense contracts were the same, own the media company. So it was in their financial interest to not show true facts about what was going on then. So I got into research really as a part of my my fight to seeking truth. And so it was called the Kemet Report. Did anybody post any of what they saw with the Kemet Report? The word Kemet was one of their ancient names for Egypt. Sometimes it's spelled without vowels, K-M-T, or the way I spelled it was K-E-M-I-T, the Kemet Report. And I wanted to go back beyond and go back to Egypt because as a political science major, most of my professors started their philosophy of the world and of politics with Greece in Europe. And Greece is the foundation of Western civilization or European civilization. Well, my question was, well, what happened before that? Did we not have any type of political understanding prior to that? And I was a beast in my classes because I was raising those questions. I said, so where did Socrates get his knowledge from? Where did Plato get his knowledge? Where did all of those so-called great Greek philosophers, and they were great, I'm not trying to belittle that, where did they get their knowledge from? Well, they got it from Africa. And so I started knitting these things together as I was at the time very much a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And I started presenting this at church conferences. I started writing and submitting these newsletters, and people were subscribing to my newsletters in the 90s. And that's what led me to research. And a lot of the things that you see on my TikTok pages or any of my social media is coming from research I did not only years ago, but that I'm continuing to do now. But I didn't have the fear. Well, let's not back up. I did have the fear, but I overcame the fear of presenting this information because many times people say, well, if I put that out there, they're going to come after me or I'm going to be shunned or I'm not going to get this job or anything. Look, people, I'm just going to say that fear is greater than what actually happens to you. It's the fear that, what happens, something's going to happen to me if I do this. And the Reverend Dr. King used to call this the martyr syndrome. That people had the martyr syndrome. Oh, if I come out and if I speak out against the war, if I speak out against, rape, and if I speak out against these things are going to happen to me. Well, you know what? Very rarely do they actually happen. But even if they do, it's never as bad as you think they're going to be. When I was at UMBC, there was at the time, and I was part of an organization that led a sit-in 1987. And the sit-in was based on the fact that there was some serious racial injustices going on the campus at that time. And so we had enough. We had tried for a year to get some change and nothing had happened. So we had decided it was time to take over the administration building. This was, again, in the spring of 1987. But before we did, many of us organizers sat down and we had to deal with the consequences. We said, well, look, we're going to take over this building. Who's willing, there's the possibility that we could get kicked out of school. There's a possibility we could go to jail. There's a possibility, all the possibilities we can think of, we laid out. And each one of us had to figure out how far we were willing to go. I remember calling my parents. I talked it over with my parents, shared with them everything that was going on. And they said, well, look, if you feel passionate enough about it and you know what you're doing is for right, then we stand by you. And that was huge for me to have that support. So I said, no matter what, I was going to do it. And I remember it was one colleague of mine, and we're still good friends now. At the time, he said that he was concerned because he didn't want to get kicked out of school. His folks worked too hard, and that wasn't too hard, and that wasn't that we would possibly get kicked out. So that's real. I didn't, that's his decision that he had to make. What was funny though was 20-something years later, and he still participated in it, but that was his fear. But it was funny, 20 years later, he was calling me, asking me for a job. And I've not only just participated in that, but participated in so many different levels of civil civil disobedience and organizing, that the fear has never stopped me from doing what I needed to do. So I think for me, if I may say, is just, don't let fear stop you. Embrace it. don't let it suffocate you. Have a conversation with it and say, fear, what is it that you want me to know? What is it that you want me to understand? And then when you realize that fear can be your asset in helping you move forward, like it was, as I mentioned, with Michael Jordan, getting to where he wants to go. And for those that are tuning in again, I'm Devin Walker, Uncle Devin, the children's drum cussionist. You see how we created our own word there. And some may ask, why am I in business? And primarily I'm in business to provide high quality musical entertainment for children and family historically marginalized, that is that is entertaining, that is educational, fun, and led by the drum. So that's why we're in the business, and that's what we do here. And I'm just so grateful that now I'm able to pull all these different things together into a music and art type of program that educates. My album, Be Yourself. Again, I was speaking and teaching children about the importance about being themselves. I came through the black church like many of us. While I'm not active in the church now, the black church is still part of my history, which I love and I appreciate it. So one of the songs I did on that album was called the Church Usher Dance. How many church ushers we got out there that used to be up in the church, especially in the black church? The church ushers, well, y'all were vicious. I tease my friends in the Nation of Islam all the time. Y'all might have the fruit of Islam, but I don't know. I would not want to go up against any of these church ushers, because you walk down the wrong aisle, well, they're going to hurt your feelings. But I did a song called the Church Ushers Dance, and it was a song about an 8-year-old named Trey, who was a preacher's kid. How many PKs we got out there? Oh yeah, we got to get some of them PKs. Now PK is a preacher's kid. Now I was a preacher's kid, but I didn't grow up a traditional preacher's kid. My father didn't become a minister until I went to college. We grew up in the church, but he wasn't a preacher. So I didn't grow up as a true PK. But so anyway, Trey was 8 years old. He was a preacher's kid. Never been to a secular party before, because his parents were pretty strict and didn't go to. But one day he got a reprieve to go to his friend's birthday party that was down the street. So he went, and all the other kids was there, and they were having a good time, and people doing the latest dances and all that. Trey didn't know what to do. He was just, and everything was fine, as we said in the song, until somebody said, "Let's do the Soul Train line." Now, in case you don't know, that's a dance solo. Everybody had to do it and shine. That's what we say in the album. So everybody ran formed two lines, started going down the line, doing their dance. And as you know, the line gets wherever you are, there's a point where it's your turn to dance. Well, Trey didn't know what to do, because he has never, he's never danced outside of church or anything like that. So he did what he only knew what to do. And he started doing this church usher dance. Now, you got to go to Uncle Devin's Uncle Devin Show YouTube page and take a look at it and see what that church usher dance is. But you've seen it before. But then he was amazed that everybody loved his dance. It became a huge dance hit. People started doing it around the world. All because he had the courage to be himself. And so that was one song. I got another song on there about no such thing as good or bad hair. Got another song, and I'm not trying to advertise about the album. That's not my whole point. My whole point was I had all these messages in these songs, but guess what? As I'm doing these songs, I was actually speaking to myself as well. And I shared before that, I've always asked the Devin of the future to guide and speak to the Devin of today. Just like I'm asking the Devin of today to guide and to guide the Devin of the past. Because as I was growing up, there were things that I was able to avert, and I couldn't figure out why and how. But I know that it was the I in me that did that. That's the power of that. I am. The I in all of us. is powerful. Think about that. If you can go back and give your past self advice, what would you give? Because everything is continual. History is not an event but a process. So the past, present, and future is all connected, and you can ask yourself of tomorrow to give you advice today to guide you. But in order to do that, we have to sometimes slow down. We have to slow down, be in a quiet place so that we can hear that voice. And that's kind of where I am today. Are we willing to hear the voice? Are we willing to slow down enough, let all the chatter and the noise around us just kind of dissipate? Find a quiet place for you to connect to you, to the I am in you, to the God in you, to whatever you attach to. But we're there's so many different things that we can connect with, and so for me, this is where I'm going, where I'm at, and part of how I decided to walk away from a 6-figure job. Now, I will say this, and I'm not trying to put a lot of the, I want to be real with you that, of course, anybody will tell you that when you start a business, the first 5 years are the hardest. I think I heard Ice Cube even say that. Say that the first 5 years, that's the time where you're going to starve. Now, we didn't starve, but we didn't make the money that we wanted to make. But it was around that 5th year, after being consistent, after being persistent, that we started to see a change. And last year was one of our best years ever. And you have to see life is a marathon and not a sprint. You have to be in it for the long haul. Looking for overnight stardom doesn't always work. You all are proof of that now. For all of you all who are following me on my social media pages and different things, I'm so honored. You all just don't realize how honored I am that you take the time to listen and to follow us. And so to have the number of followers that I have on many different platforms is just incredible. But it didn't happen overnight. It took years to develop that personal relationship with people. I want the personal relationship where people know they can reach out and they're going to hear some authentic truth, information based on research, information that's just not emotional. Sometimes it's emotional, but it's not based strictly on emotion. It's based on facts, and that to me is what I've come to realize. So I want to encourage you that wherever you are in life, wherever you are struggling with, tune in and find out what your true authentic self is. For some, it is to continue where you are, and you can become yourself. You don't have to take the drastic steps like many people do and quit your job to do this and that. But for some of you, that might be what you need to do. But whatever you decide it is, it's up to you to decide. Don't let nobody else determine that for you. Yes, you can talk with people and get advice, but at the end of the day, it's all about what's in here. What is it that's telling you in your heart? I always remember the movie Pay It Forward, and some of you all may remember that movie from, I think it was the 1980s. And it opened up with a teacher walking into the classroom, and he had a question on the board, and it says, "If there's one thing in this world that you can change, what would it be?" And then he said, after that, "Now put it into action." That was his class. That's what he was teaching. For us to figure out first and foremost, what is that one thing that if you can change, you would change, and then put it into action. Many people have the first part. They have the problem. But many people don't follow through with the action. That's why I would love to share with you. Some of you all have been following me may know that, I have what is called my PSAs. my PSAs. It stands for problem, solution, action. I've gone to too many meetings. I've been involved in too many community meetings where there's always that one or two people that will come there, and their whole job is to do nothing but complain. Oh, the city doesn't do this. I need trash cans here, and y'all don't do this, and you'll spend your whole meeting just dealing with their problems, but they never have a solution, or they're never willing to be part of the solution. So I've always said that the first thing that we do is you do have to identify a problem. That's almost like, you got to have an idea of what you're doing and why you're doing it. But once you identify a problem, I believe that each one of us need to first start with ourselves. Then what is a solution? Okay, we start with the solution. Okay, all right, so I have a problem. This is the problem. Here's the solution. But then you can have a problem and you can identify a solution, but if there's no action to bring about that solution, then that solution is meaningless. It's hollow. So then the next question is, what action needs to be taken? What are you willing to do? And see, and now growing up in the church, this is where I remember they make, well, not making me, but when I sung in young youth choirs, and I remember that one song we used to sing, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let it begin with me. I took that to heart. Let it begin with me. How do I bring about peace on this earth? I got to be willing to overcome fear. I got to be willing to stand up in the face of oppression, in the face of the powers that be, and speak truth to power. And so I would just say that, what is your PSA? What is your personal PSA? Everything that I do and that you see in my social media is all representing my PSA. This is what I can think is a problem, or not the problem, but a problem. This is what I see as a solution, and this is the action that I'm taking. That's why on Friday, I'm releasing our video, Move the Money. This is a song that does two things. It honors the great Junkyard Band here in Washington, D.C. Big ups to all the Junkyard Band crew. Because in 1986, they had a song that was picked up by Def Jam Records called The Word. Some of y'all may have heard it, and some people may have heard it and never really knew what it was about. But to me, that was one of the greatest social protest songs in go-go music history. What's up, Greg? All right, it's my man Greg Coleman. All right. And the song, The Word, Junkyard was telling a story. Junkyard Band, first of all, was literally that. These were preteens and teenagers that started a band. And they couldn't afford instruments, so they went into the junkyard. And they got everything they can find in the junkyard, and they created their own band. And became one of the number one bands in the D.C. area, still playing today. Now, they don't play on the buckets and all that to this day, but the fact is the band is still going strong. And their song was talking about how Ronald Reagan, the former president of the United States, was taking money that should have gone to the farmers and should have gone to food stamps and should have gone to social programs and was giving it to the Pentagon. Now, these are preteens and teenagers that did this, y'all. I want y'all to understand this. How powerful that was. And they were like, Reagan making bombs, Reagan making bombs. And to me, that was one of that song really did a lot for me even when I was younger. And people loved it because it had that funky DC crank beat in there. I mean, it was just, you hear it, it just makes you want to dance. So for me, the greatest tribute that you can pay anyone is to continue their work. So I decided to do a song in honor of Junkyard Band. And also part of it is to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. I was trying to get it out before around Dr. King's birthday, but I just couldn't get it out in time. Junkyard, I was trying to get out by then, but the Reverend Dr. King had the courage to overcome his fear when in 1967, on April 4th, 1967, at Riverside Church in New York, he delivered probably his most powerful message, and that was, they call it Beyond Vietnam, why I oppose the Vietnam War. And it was here that Dr. King evolved from civil rights to human rights. And he was willing to risk everything that he had. I mean, by this time, Dr. King was known around the world. He didn't have to worry about anything if he didn't want to. He could have just went and just gave lectures, based upon his work of, back in the, 1963, 64, 65, and he could have lived well. But he put principle before pleasure. And he came out and started talking about, why does the United States in the Vietnam War? And he called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And he ended up saying that the three greatest evils in this world was racism, poverty, and militarism. And that any nation that spends more money on its military than it does on its social programs will die a spiritual death. So my song was to honor him, also to honor the Junkyard Band, but but also to continue it and elevate it to another level. So I created Move the Money. This song talks about the fact that despite there being millions of people in poverty in the United States, close to 37.9 million people in poverty, the Joint Congress last year both unanimously granted a record $886 billion to the Pentagon for wars around the world. And it's crazy because they want us to get into this battle between Democrats and Republicans. They are joint when it comes to this issue, when it comes to war. And we can't get this, we can't allow that to hide what the true issues are there. So in my song, I'm talking about how we need to move the money, how we need to take do movements and organize movements to get them to take the money from the military and put it back into social programs. If you want to stop all these carjackings, if you want to stop all these social issues that are going on in the community, we have to invest in the community. Our babies don't feel that we are serious. So that's why they're committing all these different, and let me back up. It ain't just our babies. Don't get me wrong. It ain't just our children. Just in society in general, there's an African saying that a child who is not embraced by its community will burn it down just to feel its warmth. And so to me, when we see what's going on in our community, it's that we have not taken the steps to make our children feel embraced. We got to put our money where our mouth is. And we got to stop allowing those corporate entities to play the games while we pay the bills. So anyway, that's enough about that. You're going to be hearing more about the video coming out. Check it out. It's going to be coming. We're going to be releasing it on Friday, March 1st. But the single is out right now. Go to any of your platforms, any of your music platforms, and check out the song. I'm honored that my wife is the reporter in the beginning of the song, so you'll hear her giving some statistics there. But then after that, I was just right here in my basement cranking out this music called "Move the Money," and to encourage, to thank Junkyard, but encourage the next generation to show them how we can merge our political and and cultural expression. So I've been talking a lot. Okay. And on Tuesday, that's the 5th, right? Is that the Tuesday?
Thursday.
Oh, is it Thursday? Okay, next Thursday. Is that the 5th of, what day is it?
March 5th.
March 5th. Okay, all right. My wife's on the side of here. If you got a moment, if you're in the D.C. area, come out to the Capital City Go-Go basketball game. That's the G League for the NBA's Washington Wizards. And they're called the Capital City Go-Go in honor of Go-Go. Well, they're having their education day, and I'm so honored that the Uncle Devin Show will be performing the pregame. I'll be doing halftime little skits. So I'm not halftime, timeout skits where I'll run out into the middle of the court and have some fun with the children, while during the timeout. And then, all right, hold your horses. We've already done one. I'm about to do it again. Then at halftime, I'm performing with the great Juju from EU and Sweet Cherie from Belladonna. All right, let me let that sink in for a minute. Y'all just don't know. I'm like giddy like a little kid now because I grew up listening to both of them. But certainly as a drummer, Juju, and we did one education day already on February 8th, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And so it's during the day. It's at I think the game starts at 11:30, and I believe it's only $5. You can bring your whole school. It's $10. Okay, you can bring your whole school to the game, and we've created a resource guide. Is that what we call it? A resource guide? So that it's about 12 pages long that has history of go-go, has history of instruments, it has activities, it has resources that is passed out to everyone that comes there. So, and of course, it has information about our go-go album, children's go-go album called In the Pocket, which I believe is the first ever children's go-go album in the world. So yes, it is a great honor. I mean, seriously, I don't take it lightly. Whenever I perform, I always look at it like, okay, this might be my last performance ever. I'm going to leave it all out here because that's what it's about. I like to be able to perform that way. So that's going to be on March 5th at 11:30 a.m. and that's at the sports. What is it called? Entertainment Sports Arena in Southeast Washington, D.C., where both the Go-Go and the Washington Mystics perform. A beautiful facility over there. And I really have to thank Teaching for Change. If you get a chance, look up Teaching for Change based here in Washington, D.C., what Keisha, Vanessa, and others are doing there. They're the ones that have made this possible for me to have this experience. So thank you, Teaching for Change. I'm so appreciative of this partnership that we've had now for probably close to 2, maybe 3 years, if not longer. And I look forward to it. So anyway, I've been on here, just talking for a little while. Don't know if anyone has any comments or questions. I'll be glad to share with you. But I'll just say thank you. Thank you for holding me accountable when I post stuff online, asking questions. That's holding me accountable. If it's something that I've said that you think may not be accurate, many of you have come back and said, hey, I disagree. And that's what I want. My goal is not to suggest that I have the truth, but to try to be part of the truth. And that's what I end up looking to do. So I encourage you to visit my website, UncleDevinShow.com. Take a look at our site. You'll see a video on there where I was honored to perform 26 shows in 1 week down in Shreveport, Louisiana, for over 10,000 students. Man, it was amazing. And that picture on the video on the front cover is just that. But continue to follow me on social media and also on YouTube and wherever you may see us. And I think that's about it. I don't know if there's anything else. If anyone has any comments or questions before I exit. Got some work to do. Got plenty of work to do because that's the one thing. When you're in your own business, there's no weekends. There's no holidays. You have to keep grinding, but you have to find time for yourself. So that's what I'm about to do now. I'm going to get a nice breakfast. I have to do better. Hopefully you all are doing the same thing. Give us 15 minutes a day at least where you're exercising, where you're stretching, where you're on a bicycle or your walker or your anything. Just give us, if you can do 15 minutes, I call it 15 minutes to life. Okay, how about that? I've got to hold myself to that. You all hold me to that because I've got to do a little bit better job of focusing on myself. So I believe that's about it. I want to thank I Am Entertainment, our social media and marketing management team that has gotten us this far. You may know much about her, but Kimberly Locke is the owner of it, and that's the Kimberly Locke from American Idol, by the way. Yes, that Kimberly Locke. Absolutely phenomenal, and we're learning from each other. When we have meetings, we talk, and we realizing how we inspire. But her and all her team, both past and present, have just been nothing but the great for us in the work that we do. So check out I Am Entertainment. If you need some help with social media, it's taken a lot of pressure off of me to be able to be me. And they pushed me and encouraged me to be my authentic self. And so over the last year, that's when you started seeing me speak more about, the knowledge and the history that I have, that I was really not necessarily afraid to do. I just was thinking that it might interfere in the work that I was doing. And on the contrary, it's totally transformed the work that I've been doing, just to speak my truth. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you. And let's make that change. I'm going to leave you with that question I asked earlier. What's one thing in the world that if you can change, you would change? What's one thing in the world that you feel most passionate about that you can change? And then my next part is, whatever that is, put it into action. Peace and love. I love each one of you. And remember, life is a drum, so beat it. Here's the history of the fashion dress called the bustle that many people don't know. Sarah Bartman was a South African woman born in 1789 in the Eastern Cape region. Due to her physical features, which included a prominent buttock and an elongated... Let's dive into the history of Aunt Jemima. In 1889, Chris Rudd and Charles Underwood started the Pearl Milling Company, laying the foundation for Aunt Jemima's pancake mix. The inspiration for the name came from a minstrel show featuring the song... This is part 2 of the history of the board game Monopoly many people don't know. As part 1 of this series mentions, Lizzie McGee invented the board game, the Landlord's Game, in 1903 to demonstrate how landlords have an advantage over other enterprises. However, her invention... Here's the racist history of the gospel Amazing Grace that many people don't know. The song Amazing Grace was written in 1772 by John Newton. He was born in London in 1725. Despite his Christian upbringing, he believed, as many people in Europe believed, that trafficking and human trade was justified since slavery was allegedly permitted in the Bible as long as slaves were treated with dignity and kindness. Here is an aspect of African history of the Bible many people don't know. In the Old Testament book of Genesis, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who repopulated the earth after the deluge or flood. According to the genealogy presented in Genesis, Ham is the progenitor or the original descendant of the southern people of the earth. That's it. And I want to kind of expand a little bit more on this conversation about Easter. In fact, you notice that the last couple of holidays for both Christmas and Easter, I actually did a post about them. And I wanted to do that because I don't know about you, that right now, despite the fact that there is over 37.9 million people impoverished in the United States, that this nation spent a record $886 billion on its military. Really, I want to honor today, take time to honor the students who have been protesting and continue to protest. A lot of the things that have been going on around the world, specifically in Palestine. And so I want to make sure that I give them enough love, because the work that they did, and not just them, but I want to specifically highlight them. I come from the student movement background, and so I know how important, and that pretty much most social movements start with our students and youth. And so I want to make sure that we continue to uplift them, and I want to share with them an example of how focus on have to continuously, my organizing for children. See, my entire life has been about organizing. When I came out of the student movement in the late 1980s, moving into the 90s, I was organizing, particularly focusing on students and youth. And then as I got older, I started organizing adults. And then in my latter years, I decided that there's a different way that I want to try to reach children. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that if we don't give people the foundations to think critically, those are the times when where people, certain beliefs can kind of just set in, and we got to give people the tools to be able to really just see things objectively.